Hi, welcome to Iteration Office Hours. I'm Sid, co-founder and CEO at GitLab. And who has the first item? Crystal, thanks for putting the first one on.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal. I'm the engineering manager for the backend health team. What we have on the agenda is a little bit of a process change that we've been working on within the team. And this has been evolving since about 12.9. So the team was building out this new feature set for the status page, which was a brand new category. They had everything gated behind a feature flag. And then at the end of 12.9, the entire feature set missed the 12.9 deliverable because there was one issue that was pretty foundational that didn't make it. And so everything was left behind a feature flag. So when we got to 12.10, we decided to have, we had another feature set that was coming up, and we have one engineer who is managing this kind of feature flag process where we have features broken down by minimal subsets so that we're always ready to release whatever is done by removing the feature flag. And so this worked out very well. The health teams had the opportunity to build out a couple of new, like brand new categories where we have lots of small features and we want to release as much of it as possible each time through. And so we've been building up to this ability to just clear the feature flag right before the final release candidate goes out and then ship whatever we have that's done. And so this has been working out really great for our team, and we're continuing to kind of build on it as we go through each milestone.
Cool, thanks for sharing. So it missed 12.9. Was 12.9 the only kind of release in which you were working on this functionality, or was there also work done in 12.8?
I believe it was all part of 12.9 for the status page. This was before I joined the team, so I wasn't there for 12.8, but I believe that this was all a pretty small feature set that was going in to do the minimal set of features for the status page.
Cool, thanks for that. Was the work started immediately on this foundational MR, the 26717?
So I think the way this happened was like all of these features were built up in 12.9. It was almost ready to go, and then barely missed by this one piece. And then again in 12.10, the team was working on something different, and kind of all of this work was already done. And then even at the end of 12.10, there was a problem that came up and it almost slipped again. And so really, I think the key takeaway from all of this is that we've broken things down into like deliverable sub features instead of having one foundational piece and then we lay the back end on top and then we lay the front end on top. So we're really trying to slice things down as much as possible.
Yeah, a few things that stand out, like there's an overview page here and a detail page. So you could also say, hey, we're not going to have a detail page for now. We're just going to have the overview page. So that might have been something.
Yeah, definitely. With the latest work that we've been doing we've been working on the alerts and incident management. We have things broken up by list and detail, but then we also have features that are like column sorting or adding additional columns or adding additional details to the detail page. And that way we always have something that's ready to go.
Yeah. Why was everything behind a feature flag?
I think so that was really just so that the production releases weren't releasing anything that wasn't totally done yet. We also have a lot of involvement from our product designer to make sure things are in really good shape before they're fully released. So I think a lot of that is just to kind of guard things from being released before they're completely ready and vetted.
Yeah. Ideally, in an ideal world, and I don't, this is more in general, I don't know about this specific one, but you shouldn't need feature flags. Feature flags are extra work. So anytime you also need to do a feature flag, you're gonna take away from some of the work, and it might be worth it. Might be a good trade-off. But for example, if it's just a background thing, like the add background worker to publish incident to status page, you can just release that. Might not do anything because you haven't released the front end stuff, but doesn't matter. You can still merge that to production. No need to put it behind the feature flag, unless it's because you're afraid the background worker will go berserk and the operations team needs a way to turn it off or something. That's a different one. But just talking about, it's okay to release something that doesn't do anything as long as it's not affecting the interface too much. And the other thing you mentioned is like, it needs to be in a really good shape. Well, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't need to be in a really good shape. Maybe if you're not super happy about the interface and you think it's in a really bad shape, maybe you don't publish the release post yet, but you do have it available as a functionality in GitLab. Or you publish it in the release post and you say, this is alpha. Looks horrible. And you get 2 release posts to announce your feature, which is great. So those would be a couple of remarks. Thanks for sharing.
All right, thank you.
Craig is not in attendance. Trevor, can you read Craig's comment?
Absolutely. I'm curious, now that you're co-developing the MVC for product analytics, what would you have done differently when looking back through the lens of iteration?
Yeah, iteration is hard. And I in this meeting, I get to sit from a loungy chair and talk about it. I anticipated a performance concern. So I was like, product analytics, it's going to get a ton of data. So receiving that data is a performance concern if it hits our Rails stack. So we should write that in Go. So I went off, learned a bit of Go, wrote it in Go. But you could also say like, hey, maybe we should have iterated, because Dimitri decided to make it in Rails. And because of that, he didn't need collaboration from the Omnibus team to package up that Go binary in our stack and everything else. So that was a simpler thing. I could have programmed that. No Omnibus team required. I was like prematurely optimizing. And then when it becomes a success and there's too much load on the Rails workers and everything else, then we can rewrite it in Go. But by the way, writing Go is pretty tedious. So maybe it's even faster to iterate in Rails for a while until we know what we want to make, until we know it's popular, and then optimize it. So I think it's a great question. And this was the biggest thing that comes to mind. Olivier.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. I was curious if we have already identified some possible pitfalls that get in the way of iteration as the company is growing, because as we are growing, we have more and more groups that get defined. So I think it's creating more boundaries between those groups and product areas. So it increases the risk of stepping over each other's toes, and we have multiple people that will try to contribute on the same piece of the product or same part of the application.
Yeah, it's certainly a concern. So far, I've not seen it affect us a lot. I think, first of all, we've done a great job in kind of delineating like who's doing what. I'm very proud of the categories page. If you Google GitLab categories, where we clearly say who's doing what. I think that led to a lot of help. I also think that if all the teams are iterating and shipping small pieces, it's easier to coordinate. What is super hard is like someone lands something really big just just before you're about to merge, and now you have to incorporate all those changes. So the changes are gradually, it's easier to accommodate. And we want to reduce the amount of things where people have to coordinate. We have two where we really don't see another way. One is the database. We cannot have one team kind of affect the performance of the database for like all our users and all the other teams. And the other one is security. Security is non-negotiable. So we got to make sure we always take our security precautions before releasing code. But we try to avoid as many others as we can. Like there's no central UX cabal that needs to approve everything. There's no central architecture cabal. There's no central, I don't know. I could think of a few other ones, but we want to prevent you every time you change something from having to get approval from multiple other groups. I think that's went well. Anything you'd like me to elaborate on?
Well, I would have a very great counterexample to what you just said, which is I think the secure area, because I think it's also tied to the way GitLab is in a unique position to do something different from competitors. We are trying to compete with multiple companies that do single product. We are trying to integrate all of those into one single application, which means we have an aggregation part that is not something our competitors are dealing with. And this creates this single point when we all have to converge. And particularly in secure, we have multiple groups trying to put things into the same piece. And this we have a lot of overlap between each of those teams.
Yeah, and I think also when something is misnamed, it's always kind of a warning to me that something is going wrong. I think what you're referring to is kind of our vulnerability management. Like all these tools are spewing out vulnerabilities. If not, just feel free to clarify that. And we have a vulnerability management group who's kind of doing that, but they're called the Threat Insights group. That's probably not correct. That's probably a historical artifact. And that's not renamed gives me cause for concern. And then hearing you saying it's hard to bring everything together gives me cause for even more concern. So I'm not sure how to solve that. Feel free to kind of give me an example on Slack or something that I can bring up in the product scaling meeting or something like that.
It's something we're trying to solve for quite a long time. It's really hard to find that delineation, and yeah, it's a constant issue. But this is a problem. We don't see a final solution that fits all the usage, because, for example, one category is dependency scanning, and this covers both from the beginning of getting that information about security vulnerabilities to showing it into the UI and managing it. So it's clearly overlapping the part of vulnerability management, because when you compare that dependency scanning feature with a standalone product, they have this part also part of the dependency scanning capabilities. So it's, even from the product perspective, there is an overlap to me. This is more painful for us as engineers because we clearly overlap at the time of implementation. But even from the product side, I think there is an overlap here. And I clearly don't see any solution to avoid that.
How can I help? Is it just, it's a problem, but we don't want any help? Is it, let's have a 25-minute meeting? Is there something else? But how can I contribute or not?
I don't know. To be honest, it's been something we're debating from quite some time in Secure. I think we're coming to something better recently. So, but if we keep having issues, I'll come and bother you with that then.
Yeah, well, always love to do it, but I'll wait until I get an invite, and I'd love to have a 25-minute meeting to discuss and dive in a little bit. Thanks for putting it on. Trevor, can you read the next question?
Yep, absolutely. It comes from McCready. How to balance iterations in the overhead of too many chained MRs?
Yeah. So iteration is means scoping it down to something that creates value by itself. So if you have chained MRs that like you need to merge the next thing before creating any value, like that's kind of a warning sign. It might be inevitable or it might not be. So maybe you can read the description. So Trevor, can you read 6A?
Absolutely. Apologies there. I worked on this geo sub-epic in small iterations, always aiming for short merge requests that are easy to review. That means I broke down a work lot and ended up with many merge requests across 2 projects, dependent on each other, such that the review cycle was much longer than the total time for development. Also, having to rebase often meant a lot of context switching. Going forward, I'm going to pick up work that can be interleaved and result in independent merge requests. Do you have other ideas on how to balance good iterations and the overhead of a long review cycles?
Yeah. Cool. Well, since the person is not in the call that put it on there, we need to dive into the substance to see how this is. Maybe it can be split up in different ways, but I think that's hard for me to opine on without diving in. So I'd ask Akriti to please join the call next time. Will be super cool to kind of dive in together. And maybe there's a better way, maybe not, and maybe there's a case for making something bigger in this case. But
He said I might be able to add a little more context to it. It was she was adding individual features to some pre-flight checks for failover. So each one of these additions was valuable in and of itself, but they were kind of small, but and you could have, but they were small enough that they could be oh, sorry, my dogs are going a little crazy here. Yeah, so there were small improvements that could be separated into MRs, separate MRs, but kind of the way that they were, but since they were in the same piece of code doing these pre-flight checks, it made sense to wait for one to merge before trying to get the other one merged in.
I don't understand why the review cycle took so long, but it seems these are simple pre-flight checks. Pre-flight checks by definition almost can't break anything. So it should be like you finished one, and even before you're ready to make the next MR, it should already have been merged. So I think the fact that she was able to create multiple ones in the time to like that she was able to create the next one before the first one was reviewed. I think the problem is in the review cycle. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We could have started reviews sooner and then just kind of held off on getting them merged. Something else that came up
why do you need to hold off on getting it merged? Just like I could see her like make the first pre-flight check, takes you 2 days, send it out for review, so a day later gets merged, and spend 2 days like making the next one. So after 4 days, I have one merged already at day 3, and the 4th day I send in the next MR.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And something in there were some longer some longer review times in there. So so I think that was part of the issue. Something that came up in it that I think could have been an improvement for this one and came up in some other front end MRs that our team specifically had was that since the work was related and it kind of came one right after the other, we found that if we were using different reviewers, each of them had to sort of get up to speed on what was going on, and that took some time. And so something that we actually tried, I think this was maybe a month or 2 ago, something that we tried after that helped was to, if we knew that we were going to have a series of MRs like this, that were kind of dealing with the same thing, to just try to make sure to see if we could use the same reviewers for that series of MRs. And we had some success with that.
Yeah, for sure. Like stable counterparts is always helpful. And then, yeah, you can only iterate if you have a fast cycle time. So if your review cycle is longer than your development cycle, like this is all going to break down. So your reviews need to be quick, especially if it's something that doesn't directly impact data reliability and retention. So I think that's where the fix is here. And I can imagine if you have like 5 MRs out in flight being reviewed, yeah, then you have the merge conflicts and everything else. That makes sense. Cool. Thanks for
Thank you.
chiming in, Thomas.
Right. Happy Wednesday. So we've touched on the heart of this question, or at least part of it earlier, so I'm reframing this one on the fly. But within Secure, there is a library that is used across the entire stage, and it's really not owned by any one group. It's shared custodianship. What is happening with that, though, is that any updates to this repository are have to go through multiple groups. It's leading to tight coordination, and it's also requiring and it's also leading us to do updates to a lot of other repositories that cross groups as well, which is leading which is causing us churn and making it really slow to iterate and realize the issues that are in hand. So what's the reframed question is, we're running into situations with this where it's making it seem like collaboration and iteration are at odds with each other. Are there strategies which we might be missing which could keep these values in balance rather than seemingly sacrificing one for another?
Yeah. If you deal with a shared library, one way around it is versioning. So if you make changes, make sure you bump the version number so that people can move over. The rest of the teams can incorporate the change gradually. That removes kind of the coordination problem. Another thing might be, maybe it needs an owner. I just showed the vulnerability management category that was all alone in the threat research or something like that group. Maybe they need to take control of this as well. Or maybe it's something where the teams kind of need to make sure that there's, for every release, there's some buy-in to the shared roadmap. So different solutions. I don't know which one is preferable, but those are a couple of options.
Okay, thank you. We're stuck, and so that's the reason I was bringing it here. So there's some ideas we can trace. So thank you.
If you want me to dive in further, I'd be happy to dedicate 25 minutes to that with a prep meeting and a public a live stream call.
Yeah, understood. Let me I would like to take this and let's see where we can see if we can take some see if we can pick a strategy and then move forward. And if we need some assistance, we'll certainly.
Yeah, and also feel free to bring it up in the next office hours. Brad, you have the next one. Thank you for that.
Thanks. I can't see the Google Doc for some reason. My computer's having a little problem, but I'll go off my memory of typing it. I'm interested in ways we can iterate on some of the conversion efforts from CE to EE. So I know that's obviously a large company goal there, and we've got multiple strategies in marketing and of moving customers into paid subscriptions, but some of the efforts are very large. They're big changes in pricing, packaging, tiering, feature movement, et cetera. So I'm curious if there's ways to break that down, or if you've got any ideas on how we can iterate on that in smaller chunks.
Yeah, thanks for asking. First of all, CE and EE are distributions of GitLab. So we don't use that to refer to, for example, free users. Free users, we call free users. They're on the free plan on GitLab.com, and they use the core kind of tier of functionality. And yes, it's super important to our success to be able to convince them that there's value in starting to become a paying customer. One big thing we can do for that is the following. This is our conversion for a namespace, depending on how many people are in the namespace. So if there's, or how many stages are in the namespace. Or if there's one stage in the namespace, the conversion is almost nothing. And it's a lot higher at 4 stages, and at 6 it's even higher. So what this tells you is that we're going to get more paid users if people start using more stages. So one of the most important things we can do is make sure that the other stages are discoverable and easy to get started with. I just talked to an engineer, said, hey, I want to use Netlify with GitLab. I'm like, oh, you use GitLab Pages? Oh, not sure, never heard of it. So the easier we make it to kind of discover and start using another stage at GitLab, the more successful we'll be at a company. And I think inside the product and the documentation, there's tons of opportunity to kind of lead people to the next step. And that journey, that user journey, I'm going to share that quickly. The basics of it look a bit like this. Most of the time, this is the core thing to focus on. So create, verify, release, configure, or create, verify, release. If we can make that journey as smooth as possible, then the other stages can veer kind of attached to that.
With specific regards to CE versus EE, do you see that journey being disrupted by users who start with CE and then have to make a manual move to EE?
Yeah, for sure. It's a big problem that you have to kind of reinstall or like upgrade the GitLab installation in order to move. So the easier we can make that, the better. Let's have a look at how intimidating that looks. Well, that's not super helpful.
I actually did this at a past company. We were on CE from source, and then we went to EE from package. And we did it for a number of reasons. One of them was we were moving into a FedRAMP boundary.
Okay. So if we just Google upgrade, what happened? It pointed us to the pricing page. So I said GitLab CE to EE. We're supposed to go to aboutgitlab.com/upgrade.
The third link looks like the one you're looking for.
Sorry, Olivier?
The third result should be the one you're looking for.
Yeah, I get it, but like we just lost a customer right here. I didn't want to go to the pricing page, otherwise I would have typed pricing. So that's a problem. It should have, and if anything, it should have gone to this page that actually tells you how to upgrade. But this is just updating. I want to upgrade from, this is updating GitLab. This is not the result either. Okay. Oh, upgrade CE2. Well, I guess that explains why not a lot of people are upgrading GitLab.
I'm curious if you've got any thoughts on why, or others. Do you think our users purposely start with CE because they want non-proprietary code, or do you think they're looking for the free edition of GitLab? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think in the past, we said, hey, if you want to pay us, do EE. And if you want to use the free edition, do CE. And to this day, you refer to CE as something for the free edition. So that we need to change that. CE and EE are just a distribution. If you want to use GitLab for free, the best thing is to always install EE. And you can use that for free. You don't have to pay us. You can not use a license. So I think we have to make sure we use, we talk about it like that. And we got to make sure that we make it super convenient to download Enterprise Edition all the time, because otherwise people have an upgrade problem, an upgrade that is impossible to do because we removed the documentation from our website.
Thanks, Sid.
Thanks for asking. Really important subject. I really appreciate you bringing it up. Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to share some videos that we have in progress. Nick Post has set up an epic where he and Dan Moore are interviewing a bunch of us in the UX team, asking about our perspectives on integration. And we have some linked GitLab unfiltered videos on YouTube that are in the epic.
Cool. Thank you. Any verbal questions of people who didn't write it down yet? Cool. Thanks for attending Iteration Office Hours. I appreciate everyone that put something on the agenda.